Thank you very much, and good afternoon. The topic of my presentation is all-in-place physiologically friendly illumination for mind. The wording of the psychologically and physiologically are pretty much the same, and sometimes they are interrelated. The outline will cover effects of light on circadian rhythm. Then there's light and night effects on health, wavelength effects on melatonin secretion, color temperature effects on melatonin secretion, color temperatures of current light sources, fabrication of very low color temperature OLED, and conclusion. First of all, we should say that no technical product should be claimed environmentally friendly or green any longer if they impose any threat at all on human health. Light source with energy-saving character alone cannot be qualified as environmentally friendly if physiologically or psychologically not friendly. Light itself has been realized to have a dark side. And light sources used for work during the day should soon be banned for use at night. Look at the effects of light on circadian rhythm first. According to Stephen Pauly, in medical hypothesis, he said that since we are born into a world of artificial lighting, we do not give much thought to how light disrupts the normal 24 hours circadian rhythm presented in all organisms. Biological clock rhythms are found in all living things, even algae. The circadian clock depends on dark nights and bright daylight. Dark nights allow normal melatonin production between 2 and 4 p.m. and bright daylight entrains our body clock or resets our body clock. The system is triggered by photons of light reaching specialized cells in the retina of eyes. So, during the day, or with intense light, with high color temperature, the secretion of melatonin decreases, and cortisol, also called awakening hormone, increases, helping people awake and improve work efficiency. At night, or with low color temperature dim light, melatonin level increases, helping people relax and prevent cancers. That also explains why to have candle dinner is so kind of romantic. That's because there's a physiological effect and also cause our psychological effect as well. And there's a study carried out by Ola saying how people like their room with light of different color temperature and end up with almost we should say nobody likes the atmosphere with light with color temperature of 6,500, and some portion of people like this kind of atmosphere with say 4,000 or 3,000 K color temperature as atmosphere. Since lower color temperature is more welcome, so why not developing 2,000 K or lower lighting source? Also, recent research indicates that lighting has become a public health issue. So let's look at the then effects on health. Say, shift work that involves circadian disruption is probably carcinogenic to humans, as concluded by International Agency for Research on Cancer. Also by Richard Stevens saying there's an association of non-day shift work and risk of breast cancer in women. Studies of female attendants have reported elevated breast cancer risk. So if shift work does increase risk, and if it is due to light at night, then the estimates of effect are the minimum in terms of the probable total societal impact. And also frequent exposure to light at night could cause like sleep disturbance, melatonin suppression, immune suppression, breast cancer, colorectal cancer, prostate cancer, and endometrial cancer, as reported by Black. Also, from Reader's Digest of last month, and many experts suggest in order to have a good sleep at night, we should dim the light, use blueless emission, switch TV, PC watching to book reading, or to music listening. And no street light. If there's a street light coming through the window, we should use the effective blind. And so also a very famous study carried out by a scientist in Israel, saying the brightest light at night community show a 73% higher breast cancer incidence than the darkest. That's on base of 147 community using satellite to detect the brightness of the community. And how about the weather effect on melatonin secretion? And this is the molecule of melatonin, also called an orthostat hormone. So with the presence of melatonin, tumor cannot grow. But without, tumor start to grow. That's called 0-degree cancer. Many research indicates that blue light is very effective in reducing naturally occurring melatonin levels. Here's an example showing the depression of melatonin increase with the increase of photonic density, or say increase of the quanta, and it will reach to a certain level. So for example, by using light with 460 nanometers for 90 minutes. But using the same dosage but exposed to light in the longer exposure time, the depression level becomes even higher. And here showing even using a very intense light but with the same 90 minute exposure time, the suppression level only reached around 70. So it is a function of dosage and time as well. And when we use, say, a light with a longer wavelength, say, 630 nanometer, for example, the suppression level decreased from 70 to 18, and further decreased to 5 if we use, say, deep red light. And these results are adopted from 3 different independent studies, all showing the same thing, that longer, say, shorter wavelength exhibits a higher melatonin secretion effect. That's another example done by Carbon, saying with the wavelength decrease from green light to blue, deep blue, and violet, the suppression level becomes much significant. So it is about maybe 40 times higher by using light with a shorter wavelength. And how about color temperature effect? There's a study carried out by a Japanese physician and published in Neuroscience Letter, showing he used 2 commercially available fluorescent lamps, like energy-saving compact fluorescent tube we are using. The one is the cold white with a 5,000 K color temperature, the other is the 3,000, and he used a filter to filter away the blue light, and then the corresponding color temperature dropped to 2,300, and the suppression level decreased significantly with the decrease of color temperature from around 78 to 50, then to around 16. And this curve indicates that by not using light source with a lower color temperature at night, so our melatonin level will not be affected. But another study also indicated the time required to suppress 50% of melatonin would drastically decrease with the increase of color temperature. So again, that's telling us that we should use light with lower color temperature in order to safeguard the secretion of our melatonin. And here say the specific results by using bright LED light, but all on base of 100 lux, based on the same brightness, and using white LED, it takes only 30 minutes to suppress 50% melatonin. Using cold fluorescent tube, 15 minutes. Incandescent bulb, 39 minutes. This means incandescent bulb is at least 3 times safer than that of LED or fluorescent tube. Just exactly what's shining on us right now. So it's not safe to use, especially at night. And the study also showed if we use the monochromatic ray, it took 400 hours to suppress 50% of our melatonin, but we only have 24 hours a day. That means monochromatic red light has the least suppression effect. But people cannot take this kind of light as illumination because it doesn't provide any visual comfort at all. It does not have any color rendering index character. So the safest light supposed to sit in between that of candle and monochromatic red. Here shows how the importance of the very high color rendering index. With very high color rendering index, it can provide visual comfort and reflect the true colors of a given object. That explains why monochromatic red light cannot be used as a general lighting source. And also, it's very important to realize actually the industry revenue for light source with very high color rendering index is even much bigger than the sum of the other 3 lighting sources, that with a high color rendering index, medium, and low color rendering index. And many current lighting technology are competing in this area. But this one only have a much lower industry revenue, and much little attention has been paid on creating light source with very high color rendering index. In order to be safe, to be used safely at night, the light source must be a low color temperature as well as a high color rendering index. So, in order to fabricate a very high color rendering index OLED, it requires a sunlight style spectrum that has a continuous emissive spectrum. And it must have at least 3 emitters and separated into emissive layers to prevent interference. And the doping concentration must be precisely controlled, and hence it requires a new fabrication method. And we have invented a method so-called solvent premixed interposition source. By using this method, a limited number of emitters can be used at the same time with precise doping concentration control. This example shows how we use the method to make a very high color rendering index OLED. This device is a device with one white emissive layer, and this another white OLED device, but with say a red dopant doped into a blue light emitter host. By combining these 2 white emissive layers together, we might reach a very high color rendering index by our calculation. So when we put these 2 layers, these 2 white emissive layers together, due to the interference of one to the other, and the color rendering index does not shows high. But with a nano interlayer called a whole modulation layer, or called carrier modulation layer, and the entering hole of electron can be properly regulated. But if the interlayer is too thick, maybe in one layer they would accumulated too many holes and too little electron in the other. So the color rendering index still is not very high. But by using a proper carrier modulation layer, we can regulate the distribution of hole in one layer and against a balanced injection of electron in the same layer, and also a balanced injection of hole and cap and the electron in another layer. So we will be able to get a very high color rendering index. Above figure showing we are using an OLED with 5 spectrum ranging from red all the way to deep blue. And without using any hole modulation layer, it only has a 73 color rendering index. With hole modulation layer as thick as 4 nanometer, only 77 can be obtained with a proper thickness, and we can get a 96 color rendering index at 1000 nits. And the color temperature of current lighting source will be a good parameter for us to get a detailed understanding. And here shows the color temperature of sunlight. The sun rises with the initial color temperature around 3000, and with time, its color temperature increase and also the intensity increase. And when the time is setting, it reach around 2500 K, and also the intensity become much lower. And how about the light? If we need a night, should we use the one, say, with low color temperature, or should we use the one with very high color temperature? And noon is 5500, and in cloudy days, 6500 in northern country like in Finland and else, and have 8,000 to 10,000 K color temperature. But for night, that's the color temperature we should give it some attention. People tend to use, say, a light with high color temperature and very intensified for night. Actually, that's not the proper method anymore. Say, for 5,000 years ago, Egyptians invented the candle, and people using electricity to drive the light about 130 years ago, and that comes incandescent bulb with a color temperature around 2700, and comes a cool white, say cold white fluorescent tube, warm white. The warm white still have 3000 K color temperature, or we also call it a warm CFL. Actually, it's not safe to use at night. And LED is blue light driven, so it has color temperature at a very high range. And back in 2009, we invented the sunlight style color temperature. For OLED, its color temperature can be as low as 2,500 and all the way to 8,000 by varying the applied voltage. So people are making so much effort on fabricating, say, the white light. But how about for resting or, say, staying at home during the night? Should we use the white and bright daylight with a high color temperature? And that's a myth, or it is also a coincidence. That's all saying in Taiwan, in China as well, we have an ancestor lived for 800 some years. But when I check at the Bible, there's 11 generations from Adam and on, and they all lived for 800 to 900 years. And that's the age when the big flood occurred. That's 4,800 years ago, and 500 years ago, candle was invented. And to about 200 years after invention of candle, human lifespan started to drop significantly, and all the way to here, the average lifespan is around 70, maybe even lower if we try to use the white light at night. And as you can recall, Abraham was born back 4,000 years ago for 175 years, and Moses, and was born in 3,500 years ago, lived for 120 years, and King David, born 3,000 years ago, lived for 70 years. Pretty much the average longevity we have nowadays. So we need highlight at work or during the day. But do we still need highlight at night? Of course not. Let's say in Chinese, but okay. Let's say the banning of the use of incandescent bulb. We all know the policy. And banning incandescent bulb could be a big mistake until high color rendering index, low color temperature OLED emerges. So far, incandescent bulb has the lowest color temperature, and it's supposed to be the safest light source, relatively speaking. And forcing us to use the CFL with higher color temperature at night, that's a very serious mistake. And we may save some energy, maybe a few dollars per year, but we need to spend maybe 100,000 per year to purchase the medicine to cure cancer. Again, when you contact people working on OLED, they all tell you that you need to make OLED, white OLED with color, say color coordinated, or say color temperature sitting around in this area. And the area has color temperature ranging from 2,700 and all the way to around 6,000 or 7,000. But there's almost no attention being paid for light source used at night, and with color temperature much less than 2,500. We all know that the OLED lighting market is to take off this year, with the revenue forecasted to surpass pixel-metric OLED display in 2 or 3 years, reaching 6 billion by 2018. And the dashed line meaning they have a test sample, and the solid line meaning they're going to put into mass production for real. And Konica Minolta have made that happen. There's a news report that in July 12, and saying Konica Minolta has been developing OLED lighting as one of its promising new business in the field of environment and energy. The to-be-produced OLED lighting panel has the world's highest efficacy. The panels will be produced by German-based Philips technology. And they realized that OLED lighting is thin, lightweight surface light source, high energy efficiency, low temperature, mercury-free, mild to eyes, friendly to people. But they only realized that because it is free of UV. They didn't realize that high color temperature white light is not friendly to our physiology, or say it's not safe to the secretion of melatonin. And the spec they plan to produce, as you can notice, that they're going to have a light source with color temperature of 2,800. Again, they're not safe at all to use at night. They may be good for use for the day during working. So we know little attention has been paid on low color temperature light sources until later. So we are expecting more attention, or say more effort, be put in this area so the human health can be safeguarded. And here saying that the project cost of OLED lighting panel, they always challenge people working in OLED lighting, saying you are producing a light source with very costly. And the total cost for this year is $900 US per square meter. And that's not going to allow OLED to compete against any current lighting measures. But by realizing safety, health is much more important, I think the cost will be no longer a big issue. So its effects for illumination business actually can be based on melatonin suppression-free, very low color temperature OLED with very high color rendering index. besides being UV-free, infrared-free, mercury-free, flickering-free, and spiking emission-free, dimmable, and energy-saving. So how to fabricate a very low color temperature OLED? The major principle is to use no blue or say using laser blue emission. There's one example showing using say a blue emission layer and the other one is the orange-red. By mixing the two colors together, we can have a warm white light source. Again, we need an interlayer to regulate the injection of the hole against that of electron. And the best device is the device 3. Using, I say, a blend interlayer, some hole can be retained here and some injected into another layer. And the injection of hole and electron is balanced. And that is also balanced in another layer. And by obtaining these two colors, then we can get a white light. And if the orange-red emission is stronger, then we're going to have an emission with lower color temperature. So the color temperature we obtain is around 1900, and with about 29 lumen per watt at 1000 nits, and that's at least 2 times higher than that of incandescent bulb. And this is a device without using any light coupling technique. By using a light outcoupling technique, the efficacy can be increased at least by 50 to 100%. That means the efficacy is already very close to that of incandescent fluorescent tube. So it will be a safe light to use at night. But this one does not have a very high color rendering index. And it shows at the bottom, it's an OLED with a even lower color temperature, and the efficacy is even higher. And this the device without using any blue dye, without using any blue light, and I believe this one would be even safer to use at night. And we have tried to fabricate an OLED with low color temperature and also with very high color rendering index. And this device also contains 5 spectrum in the visible range. And that's we are lucky enough to find a commercially available red dye with 6 spectrum in the say long wavelength range, and coupling with say a yellow one and a deep emission, we can have say very warm light source with a very low color temperature. It's around 1800, and resulting color rendering index is 87, and so actually it's relatively high. In order to be higher than this, we need to contain some blue emission. Again, it makes the light become hazardous, or say very harmful for human health to use at night. But we are using fluorescent emitters, and the inherent device efficiency is kind of low. So we still have a long way to go to say, for example, to get low color temperature, high color rendering index, but the power efficiency must be higher as well. So the conclusion is, a good light source should be physiologically and psychologically friendly besides energy saving. Light we use at night should be different from that at work during the day. The ideal night light should be the ones with low color temperature or blue emission free, as pointed out by many medical research reports. Short wavelength free light sources with high color rendering index are highly demanded to be an ideal light at night to safeguard health and meanwhile provide visual comfort. OLEDs with very low color temperature and high color rendering index are probably the best lighting measures ever for use at night. Cost should not be an issue for these OLED-based physiologically friendly lighting panel as long as health is the primary concern, unlike the harsh price competition among current white light techniques. And I would like to thank my students for the fine work they have been doing, and also Dr. Chen and Dr. Wan from ICHI, and the Ministry of Economic Affairs is going to invest more money on those low color temperature and high color rendering index only based research. And we thank for their financial support. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
We have time for the questions. Any questions, please? I don't see any questions so far. Then I would like to ask a couple. When you do solvent premixing method, so how do you obtain the layers? Do you cast them or spin coating?
Okay, we can do either way. But in this device, we use solvent to mix them first. And after maybe 3 or 5 components are mixed with controlled concentration, then we dry out the solvent, then we get a mixed powder. And that mixed powder is then used as the deposition source. So we deposit
for vacuum evaporation.
Yeah, in vacuum evaporation system in one, say, crucible. So all the different components are evaporated at the same time.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Any comment for the light source about color temperature? You know, I asked my student to check on the cancer statistics in Taiwan, and he came back and said he was kind of confusing because the cancer rate is quite different for male and female. I said, it's all right, just tell me the number. For women, say, okay, the top one will be the breast cancer, colorectal, and then lung cancer. And how about for men? Of course, a few men have breast cancer, but not men. So the first cancer in male in Taiwan become colorectal cancer, then comes lung cancer, and no, colorectal first, and liver cancer second, and lung cancer third. After women is breast cancer, colorectal cancer, and liver cancer.
To avoid illnesses, it is better to sleep longer in the dark.
Yes, to total darkness during sleeping is much safer.
And long sleep also is not so bad.
Good. Yeah. So that you can looking good when you have a good sleep.
What about the mechanism of this melatonin suppression? It absorbs apparently blue irradiation, does it?
It's showing on the retina. Once the retinal eye receives the photon, hit by the photon, and chemical reaction taking place. And it will stop the generation of melatonin. Or even degraded, yeah. And meanwhile, the cortisol, also called awakening hormones, start being to produce and keep us awake. So that's why many of us cannot sleep well if we watching TV intensively or looking at a PC working very hard, and you will turn around maybe for 1 and 2 hours before you can get some decent sleep. So that's why I present this talk, so I can give some information to protect the experts in polymer science, because I'm also a polymer science major person.
Okay. Any more questions? If there are no questions, let us thank Professor J.Jou.
Okay. Thank you.